On Target Institute presents a teaching from the Men on Target small group curriculum. Now with today's session, On Target founder Vince D'Acchioli.
Guys, how you doing? Good to be with you again. In our last session, we talked about the importance of adopting behavior that lights up and how critical it is for us to be Jesus to a dying world. And in this session, session 23, we're going to be talking about my attitude and my actions. And this is very, very important. I'm going to share some stories from my own life of places where I made some mistakes in this area, and I don't want you to fall into that same trap. So here we go. In the first area, I want to talk about how important it is to develop a healthy attitude toward others. In psychology, there's something called the Pygmalion effect. The Pygmalion effect suggests that my attitude and my assumption about people, places, and things can actually be the reasons why they are the way they are. Let me give you an example. If I've got somebody working for me and I'm observing them and I look at them and I say to myself, there's no way that guy's going to make it here. What the Pygmalion effect suggests is that I will unconsciously do stuff that will subvert that guy's ability to make it in the workplace. I'm unconsciously doing it. They did a test one time back in the 40s with about 20 school kids that are about the 8th grade level. They tested and discovered 5 of them were gifted learners. And they identified these gifted learners to the teacher and gave her the class for the whole year. They didn't have a gifted learner program back then. And after the year was over, they retested all 20 of the kids, and the original test was validated. In fact, these 5 kids, after a full year in class, were about 20-30% higher in everything that they had learned that year from the rest of the kids. Then they broke the news to the teacher. You see, they never tested any of the kids in the first place. They simply picked 5 kids at random and told the teacher they were gifted. I sometimes get emotional when I share that story because I think to myself, gee, I wonder what it would be like if every kid was believed by every teacher to be gifted. That's the Pygmalion effect. Years ago, I didn't have such a healthy attitude. I was asked to be on the Human Relations Commission in the city that I lived in, and I was like a bull in a china shop. There were a lot of people who didn't think the way I did, and there were some very liberal folks on here that hated Christians and didn't want anything to do with Christianity. And I had one man in particular that said something in front of me, because I was really a bull in a china shop. I was very, very tough. Verbally, I would abuse people and get mad at them. Well, this guy said something in front of me to another person who was a Christian, belittling this person's organization. It's a nationally known organization. If I named it, you'd know who it was. He made a statement, and I said, he said it in front of me. In those days, that was the equivalent of bleeding in front of a shark. I turned to this guy and I said, please repeat that. And he repeated it. The guy was a lawyer. I said, you're a lawyer, right? He said, yes. Give me the body of evidence that you've uncovered to bring you to such an incredible statement, please. His lower lip started to quiver. He was angry, and you could tell he was really upset. He couldn't think of anything. He had nothing he could give me that would cause him to make such an incredible statement. And I proceeded to take that man apart verbally, limb from limb. I said, you're a lawyer? How could you call yourself a lawyer? You are pathetic. I mean, I just really ridiculed this guy. Okay? And I did many such things, and I really liked it. Okay? But you know what I'm about to say. What I'm about to say is, listen, can you imagine that guy, after I got done with him, going up and saying, boy, I can't wait to go to that guy Vince's church and find out more about Jesus. Listen, guys, it doesn't work that way. I was speaking to a group of pastors one day. They were battling out something in the op-ed section of the newspaper, and it was ridiculous. It was a dumb thing. And I said, why are you doing this? What hill do you want to die on? Here's a simple question I like all of us to remember. Before you do or say anything, here's a question you should ask yourself. Is what I am about to do more likely to draw people toward Jesus or push them further away? If it can stand the test of that question, then I think we're in a much better place to be Jesus. Luke 6:27-28. You are to love, but to you who are listening, I say, love your enemies. Jesus wouldn't have said love your enemies if you weren't going to have any, guys. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who mistreat you. What should I have done with that guy? I probably should have taken him to lunch, got to know him, got to know a little bit about his background. He didn't come to his conclusions overnight, and just loved on him. That's what Jesus would do. Look what the Apostle Paul did. Everybody knows the story in Acts 16:23-30. Here's what it says. After they'd been severely flogged, they were thrown into prison, and the jailer was commanded to guard them carefully. When he received these orders, he put them in the inner cell and fastened their feet in the stocks. About midnight, Paul and Silas were praying and singing hymns to God, and obviously the jailer was witnessing all this. And the other prisoners were listening to them. Suddenly there was such a violent earthquake that the foundations of the prison were shaken. At once the prison doors flew open and everyone's chains came loose. The jailer woke up. When he saw the prison doors open, he drew his sword and was about to kill himself. Why? Well, because in those days, had the prisoners escaped, he would have been put to death, but he probably would have been tortured first. So he's thinking, I'm just going to get it over with, because he thought the prisoners had escaped. But Paul shouted, "Hey, don't harm yourself. We're all here." What does it say? The jailer called for lights, rushed in and fell trembling before Paul and Silas, and he brought them out and asked, "Sirs, what must I do to be saved?" Why? Why did he ask that question? Because he saw something in Paul and Silas that confounded him. And guys, listen, that's what people need to see in you and I. We are called, listen, to live a life that demands an explanation. That's what we're called to do. And we've got to remember that. That guard, by the way, his whole family, if you continue to read that story, ended up coming to Jesus, all because he observed something in Paul and Silas. And that's what people need to do with us, guys. Why is this so important? Well, look at 1 Corinthians 2:14. It's important because it says, "The man without the Spirit does not accept the things that come from the Spirit of God." Okay, why? For they are foolishness to him. He cannot understand them because they are spiritually discerned. But remember now, attitude always follows behavior. Psychologists will tell you that. I love it when psychologists agree with the Bible, by the way, because look at what it says in Proverbs 16:3. It says, "Commit your works to the Lord," in other words, my behavior, "and your thoughts or attitude will be established." This is kind of like what the Pygmalion effect is really all about. As I commit my works to the Lord, as I deliberately do things the right way, I'll have more of a proper attitude. And finally, get out of your comfort zone. Years ago, there was a guy named Larry Walters. This is kind of a funny story. And Larry Walters is affectionately known as the lawn chair pilot. He was blind. He couldn't get a pilot's license, so he decided one day to do something really pretty crazy. He got this lawn chair and he got a bunch of balloons, helium balloons. This is a true story. It happened in L.A. And he had these balloons 300 or 400 feet into the air. He thought he'd sit in his lawn chair with a BB gun, and when the balloons would get inflated, he would release the lawn chair and he'd float up in the sky, and he can control his ascent and descent by shooting out the balloons if he goes too high, right? Well, I guess it's a fun thing to do when you've got nothing better to do, right? So he sits in his lawn chair and he releases it, and he grossly underestimates the power of these 40 helium balloons. And before he knows it, Larry is floating 16,000 feet above the skyline in Los Angeles. He's frozen in his chair. He doesn't know what to do. And so he's out there floating around, and he accidentally floats into the landing pattern for Los Angeles International Airport. So here comes a TWA pilot on approach. He's having a normal day. He sees Larry up there. He calls the tower. They got this on tape. And the tower, he says, "Hey, I can't, you guys aren't going to believe this. There's a guy up here at 16,000 feet in a chair with a gun." And they said, "What?" He said, "Yeah." They got the helicopters out and they got the guy down. Finally, they got him down safely. They got him handcuffed. He's on the news that night and he's walking away. And the guy says, were you scared?" He says, "Yes." He said, "Would you ever do that again?" The guy says, "No." He said, "Well, whatever prompted you to do that in the first place?" Listen to what he said. "Sometimes you can't just sit around." Now, I'm not suggesting that's the way you get out of your comfort zone. But look at this, Numbers 32, 1-7. "The Reubenites and Gadites, who had very large herds and flocks, saw that the lands of Jazer and Gilead were suitable for livestock. So they came to Moses and Eleazar the priest and to the leaders of the community and said, 'Hey, all you guys,'" that's my translation because I can't pronounce any of those names, "the land the Lord subdued before the people of Israel are suitable for livestock. So watch the logic here. And your servants, after all, have livestock. So if we have found favor in your eyes, let this land be given to your servants as our possession. Do not make us cross the Jordan." Moses said to the Gadites and Reubenites, "Should your countrymen go to war? Israelites go to war without you? Why do you discourage the Israelites from crossing over into the land the Lord has given them?" And you remember the story of Jesus feeding the 5,000. You know, I wonder how that would go if it were to happen today. That little boy, the loaves and fishes, comes to Jesus and said, "We should feed these people." And Jesus says, "What do you got there, little boy?" He says, "I just have a few loaves and fishes." And Jesus says, "Let's just give them that." And I can imagine today, if that would have happened, that little boy would just laugh and say, "Ha, you got a plan plan B, Jesus, because I obviously don't have what it takes here." You know, and listen, what Jesus is saying to us, guys, listen carefully. God is not looking for your ability. He's looking for your obedience. That's what we have to consider. So the important thing, guys, look, we need to go light up our world. It's very important that we be Jesus and we get out of our comfort zone and step out there, and the Lord will help you. Life implication: unless I have a healthy attitude toward others, I may stifle their understanding of who Jesus is. I've got to start with having that healthy attitude. And I've got to be not comfortable sitting and doing nothing. I've got to step out. God, look, just like He multiplied the loaves and fishes in that little boy's life, He will multiply what you don't think you have in your life. And you've got to believe that. And you've got to step out and be Jesus to a dying world. Life application. Here we go. Do I have a proper attitude toward others? Think about people in your life that maybe you've got a bad attitude toward, and ask yourself the question, is something that I may be doing or thinking actually getting in the way of that person being all that they can be? And the second one is, am I willing to step out of my comfort zone and make a difference? Am I willing to say, Lord, I really need to step out here? But guys, here's where you need to be careful. You need to be plugged into the power source. Be careful that you don't step out of your comfort zone in your own flesh and in your own energy. Make sure that you're hearing from God before you step out. We talked about that in earlier sessions. It's very important for you to understand that here. I pray in your discussion time, guys, that God richly bless you. And until next time, don't forget about it.